So we'll start with the opening recitations. So the opening recitations, again, consists of four different recitations, four parts. The first two parts, it's the expressing of the resolve that is relative bodhicitta, which is the resolve to achieve, the resolve to practice the Dharma for the sake of developing the ability, the possibility of helping other beings to be free from suffering and to achieve freedom as well. So this is the commitment to waking up, the commitment to becoming Buddhas. This commitment to becoming Buddhas have to be fueled, have to be driven by the power and love and compassion for all sentient beings. So then the first two recitations, the first one repeated 3 times, second one repeated once, they are relative bodhicitta. So within relative bodhicitta, you can further divide them into aspirational aspect of it and the action aspect of it. So the first recitation is the aspiration. It's a declaration, so to say, that I shall practice the Buddha Dharma for the sake and for the benefit of all beings. In this particular formulation, certain beings, certain persons are highlighted, which is enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to freedom and liberation. In particular, these 3 types, you make a commitment to work on this project, you could say, or this resolve to become Buddha for the sake of others, and specifically for this others. Then followed by as action, which is then a commitment to therefore do whatever it takes to achieve this state. Then the third passage is taking refuge in Buddha Dharma Sangha. Again, this Buddha Dharma Sangha, it says, I take refuge. Why do I take refuge? I take refuge because recognizing that by going to Buddha Dharma and Sangha for refuge, we will get closer to developing the qualities of Buddha Dharma Sangha in ourselves, so that then we can be a refuge for others. Then after that, what is the basis of training to become such, to train to become Buddhas? It is to train in the 4 immeasurable minds: loving kindness, compassion, joy, and equanimity. So you can say the entire opening recitation is to set our reference point, our goal, right? So that our Dharma practice doesn't become yet another way to prop up ego grasping, self-grasping, yet another way to create suffering. Because even something as marvelous as the Dharma, even something as the methods that the Buddha specifically designed to help us overcome suffering, if we follow them wrongly, even that is capable of ending up creating suffering. So this clarifying our intentions, clarifying our motivation, clarifying our intentions. And last week I said, sincerity of mind. This is what I actually mean. Sincerity of mind has to be continuously being refined, so that our sincerity becomes more and more so that we become more and more motivated by the reasons that the Buddha said we should be motivated. So for example, there are discussions on how one could take refuge in Buddha Dharma Sangha out of fear. which is out of fear of the suffering that might come, out of fear of the problems that might come if we don't take refuge in Buddha, Dharma, Sangha. So that is identified as one of the reasons why people take refuge. But it also, the teachings also say, but that's not where we should be at. Even if we began at first out of fear of the sufferings of samsara, out of fear of experiencing things that we don't want to experience, that we turn to Buddha, Dharma, Sangha for refuge, we should really keep on clarifying our intentions. We have to keep on refining the sincerity of mind so that more and more it will be because of, for the sake of others, for the sake of all, for the greater good, I am doing these practices. I am dedicating myself to the practices for the greater good. Not easy. Sometimes, for the greater good becomes things that just fall out of our mouth, that we repeat without much consequence. And if on days and moments that you feel, I don't know, I sound like a hypocrite saying that. Feeling that way is okay. That means something is touching your heart, That means you're like, far from, even if intellectually, I like that idea. But that's a good start, actually, intellectually liking that idea. Then we work on refining sincerity. And that's really important. So these recitations at the beginning, they're at the beginning because it says, we need to refine our intentions. We need to clarify our intentions, to refine, to clarify, and to make clear, so that when intentions are clear, then the path becomes wide open. The path becomes clear. When intentions are not clear, and instead we go looking for, this method, that method, this way, this special way, that special way, thinking that, it's a technique problem, then we have mistaken where the problem is. The problem is not really in the technique. The problem is really in how we can work on clarifying our intentions. So let's begin. If you know these words, you can say along. If you don't, just listen and let these words kind of enter your heart. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. All mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, especially those enemies who hate me, obstructors who harm me, and those who create obstacles on my path to liberation and all-knowingness. May they experience happiness and be separated from suffering. I will quickly establish them in the state of the most perfect and precious awakening. Thus, until I achieve awakening, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. Until death, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. From now until this time tomorrow, I engage in virtuous deeds with body, speech, and mind. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. In the Buddha, Dharma, and Sangha most excellent, I take refuge until awakening is reached. By the merit of generosity and other perfections, may I attain Buddhahood for the sake of all migratory beings. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. May all mother sentient beings, limitless as the sky, have happiness and the causes of happiness. May they be liberated from suffering and the causes of suffering. May they never be separated from the happiness that is free from sorrow. May they rest in equanimity, free from attachment and aversion. Begin first with the preliminaries that turn our minds away from distraction and set us clearly on the path to awakening for the greater good, for the benefit of all. So first consider the fact that although we now have a human existence, this human existence cannot be repeated so easily again. Even if Buddhists talk about many lifetimes, it is said that to be born as a human, and to be born as a human where it is possible to practice the Dharma, it is possible to achieve the Dharma, and it is possible to attain the state of Buddha. This kind of a human existence is extremely difficult to find. And so now that we have found it, now that we have this opportunity, we should not be distracted by all the other things that we habitually label as desirable and undesirable. That we should not let things that we label as undesirable push us down with depression and suffering and dissatisfaction and unhappiness, so that we're distracted from Dharma practice. Or conversely, if things are going really well, then we get carried away and forget that also death is certain. When it will happen is uncertain. And when it comes, nothing at all except for our own minds will be of any help. So consider also how things change, how uncertain and how unreliable all phenomena is. That which is born surely will die. That which is gathered will be dispersed. That has a beginning will have an end. That which is saved up will be used. So consider the reality of impermanence and uncertainty. And consider that as long as we exist in a state of confusion, then every experience entails suffering. Every experience entails dissatisfaction. See, like even in the most ideal situations, in the so-called divine God realms, yet the happiness that one finds there is unreliable, uncertain, because all experiences within confused existence are compounded. See the nature of that. And finally, consider that suffering originates in non-virtue and happiness originates in virtue. And so if we want happiness, we need to know what to adopt and what to abandon. If we don't want suffering, we need to know what kinds of actions to adopt and what kind of actions to abandon. Then, whenever you are ready, turn your attention to counting your breath. Inhale, exhale 1. Inhale, exhale 2. And keep counting and see if you can reach 21. Before you start the counting, it is helpful to make a resolve and say, I want to remain undistracted for 21 breaths, 21 inhalation and exhalation. Make that resolve, follow through that resolve. So if necessary, even tighten your mind a little bit. For when your mind gathers, and body and mind is in the same place, then body and mind will achieve a state of calm, a state of ease that we often do not experience in our day-to-day lives. So it is worth making the effort right now to let the mind stay undistracted. So as we know, this text, this Lojong in 7 points, this text, it is focused on the main point, which is the second point, which is the main practice. Yeah? So the main practice is the practice of the 2 bodhicittas, absolute bodhicitta and relative bodhicitta. Then under the second point in the main point, the main cultivation, practice as in cultivate, right? To cultivate. In the ancient Indian language of Pali and Sanskrit, the word that we translate as meditation is bhavana. Bhavana, the root of bhavana is related to an agricultural term, which is to cultivate. Yeah, so think of this meditative practice as to cultivate, these 2 aspects of bodhicitta, in its absolute aspect and in its relative aspect. So then, that being the main practice, so all of Lojong, in fact, is to cultivate bodhicitta in these 2 aspects. And so then again, to refresh your memory, there are 10 lines given in the second point. These 10 lines, the first 5 lines pertain to training in cultivating absolute bodhicitta. The next 5 lines pertains to the training in relative bodhicitta. Then in each of those trainings, there is the meditation period and the post-meditation period. For absolute bodhicitta, the 4 lines pertain to the training for the meditation period and 1 line for the post-meditation. Now, those 4 lines for the meditation section, for those 4 lines, even if you find those lines, a little mysterious right now, or you're like, I think I understand, or maybe I don't, or I thought I understood, but now I'm not sure, right? It happens to the best of us. Then you can look at actually the line given for the post-meditation, the 5th line, which is, it says here, in between sessions, be a child of magical illusion. So the expression of in between sessions is talking about, it's addressing those who mostly are doing formal meditation, then in between sessions. So in a typical kind of formal meditation retreat, each day is divided into 4 sessions. And each session can last from 2 to like 3 to 4 hours. And so your waking hours are divided into 4 sessions. So in between sessions is usually like, in between, like say after your first session, you have a break where you have your breakfast, you exercise a little bit before you start the second session. So in between sessions, that's what this reference is. Now, for those of us who are not doing, these formal meditation retreats, we're just living our lives, right? Our day-to-day life. Then in between sessions basically mean in between your formal sitting, which for us, very long, right? But 1 line is given to say, this is what you should train in. So what is given here is be a child of magical illusion. So this line can also inform us what we should be doing in the formal meditation part. If the 4 lines in the formal meditation is too technical for you, then this 5th line can serve as a substitute for those 4 lines. Because those 4 lines actually, they are quite detailed, you know, even if they are pithy, but they're quite detailed. And I can do a whole program for several months just working through those 4 lines. I think for now, for the majority of us, taking the 5th line as a prompt, as a clue to how to cultivate in a formal way absolute bodhicitta is, I think, appropriate. So it says, be a child of magical illusion. A child here gives the connotation here is, understand that you are the product of a dream. Understand that you are a product of a magical illusion. Understand or relate to yourself as a movie character. I say, let's update this metaphor. Because sometimes magical illusion or dreams, sometimes it's translated as dreams, you know. Like see yourself as in a dream. And then, you know, people soon will go, well, you know, here is a book on dream interpretation. Here is a book on lucid dreaming. Here is a book about shamanic travels in dreams. Boy, moving in the wrong direction. Here, the point is not dream as in, you know, dream is this door into, like, you know, insights into your psyche that you otherwise cannot access. Don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying that cannot happen, but that's not the reason here when it says, consider yourself. Understand that you are the product of a dream. Here it's closer to the sense of, consider that whatever you experience, it's like a movie character experiencing a movie. A movie character has to experience the emotions quite real, you know, in order to be an effective movie. But the character, the actor playing the character, unless it's a case of psychosis, never forgets, you know, that I'm just an actor. I'm just playing this role that I've been, you know, chosen to play. And so even if I play it really convincingly, all the emotions that are expressed, that are felt, leave no traces. In between cuts. Cut, take 2, cut, take 3, cut, take 4, and 5, and 6, and 7, you know, and each time more and more convincing perhaps. But the actor never forgets. I'm playing. So this is a strategy, a noble strategy that the Buddha gave. This is not a way to bypass our emotions. And so this is also very important. This is not a way to not face the hard emotions that we don't want to deal with. And that could be very detrimental, you know. Like we don't want to talk about something. We don't want to deal with our feelings of being hurt. We don't want to deal with, you know, our feelings of nobody listens to us. Nobody pays attention to me. Nobody takes me seriously. Then we repressed it. Then we say, oh, this is like a dream. This is like a dream. No. Again, this is not a solution to those types of kind of emotional issues. I think, you know, when you're still learning these practices, don't use it as a substitute for conventional therapy. Yeah, whether it's psychiatry or psychology or psychotherapy whatever is needed. Don't like go to this as a substitute to any of those things. That I think I should say that. When you're really good at this, then I also believe later you can use the skills that you have developed here in ways that will have an impact on things that otherwise you should go see a therapist for. Otherwise you should go see, a psychiatrist for. Otherwise you should go see a psychologist for, or a psychotherapist for. This is rather different. Because those other interventions, right, they deal with one of the things that I think the differences is they deal with very directly cultural context. In ways that this, right, it doesn't take into consideration cultural context. But cultural context is really important, after all, Yes, of course, 2,500 years ago, there is dukkha. Right? 2,500 years later, there is dukkha. But the perception of dukkha, suffering, dissatisfaction, how you experience suffering, how you experience dissatisfaction, where dissatisfaction turns up, it's different, So here, be a child of magical illusion. It's really saying once you are able to adopt this strategy, then, right, you don't hold on so tightly, right, to all the emotions that turn up. Now, speaking of emotions that turn up, so here, right, whether in the off cushion or on cushion, our response to experiences, emotions, thoughts that turn up. First is we have to make this resolve not to be dragged around by these emotions. So you can first start by, without saying, oh, you're not real, therefore you have no power over me. Maybe it's hard to go straight to that point. And sometimes in being too eager to get to that point, we do what I just said, spiritual bypassing. Then that's not healthy. So how we can start is by making the resolve. Whatever the emotions, no matter how valid. Maybe there are things that I need to work out with my boss. Maybe there are things I need to work out with my kids. Sometimes kids and boss, same thing, right? Maybe I do have to work things out with my partner, with my husband, with my ex. Yeah. And of course, they can all be bosses too. But yes, there are valid things. Yes, there are issues that need to be resolved. But in the midst of resolving, in the midst of working through all of this, whatever emotions that turn up, I am making a resolve not to be dragged around by the emotions. Not to be dragged around by the emotions, which is what we all, end up experiencing. We get dragged around by emotions. Here when it says, regard all phenomena as dreams, examine the nature of birthless awareness, let even the antidote be freed in its own place. The essence of the path is settling in the alaya state. These 4 lines, right? If you have some experience, like say in Mahamudra or Dzogchen in the Tibetan tradition, or Chan or Zen in the East Asian tradition, Some of these words here, I think, are going to be familiar. So then you'll know, actually it's related to that, or that. But if you're not familiar with this, then I want to offer you and one way of thinking about what does this mean? This means really, like I said, leave them alone. Leave whatever turns up alone. Meaning whatever emotion that turns up, leave it alone. What does it mean, leave it alone? Recently, I was reading something and it gave a very good kind of analogy I want to share with you. It says, like, for example, desire. When the Buddha says, desire causes dissatisfaction. Desire causes dukkha. Yeah. The Buddha, for the most part, wasn't concerned about, say, right now, I'm thirsty. Maybe a little too much salt while cooking dinner. So you eat now a little thirsty, right? So the desire is, I want to quench, right, this thirst. So that desire has turned up, right? Then due to that desire, now look. So desire, and to satisfy that desire, right? I'm able to pick this up, this tea, and drink. So the Buddha isn't really concerned about this kind of desire. Yeah, because why? Because this kind of desire is relatively unproblematic. Because the desire found a place to land, so to say. All right, now the desire is gone. So this kind of day-to-day commonsensical, inconsequential, so to say, desire, not a real problem. Now, then the desire to be famous, the desire to have more people give up 2 hours every week to listen to this. Now that desire is, Buddha is interested in that one. Because the Buddha says, you know what? Between that desire and the satisfaction of that desire, there is a big gap that may or may not be bridged. When it is not bridged, what happens? Frustration. When it is reached, it will take a while even then to reach. Then as long as it is not reached, frustration keeps building. Hope keeps building. That is the opposite of leaving desire alone. How is another way to not leave desire alone? Can you think of another way that also doesn't leave desire alone? Anyone? Any guesses? How is another way that is not leaving desire alone? Not seeing it as a dream.
Denying it or fighting against it?
Try to eliminate it.
Yeah.
Right? Try to eliminate it. Try to change, right? Change your desire. Get rid of the desire. So whether to feed the desire or to get rid of the desire, in both cases, you're not leaving it alone. One is you're trying to please it. The other one is you're trying to destroy it. But in both cases, you're trying to actually get rid of it. The satisfaction of desire is to get rid, right? So we're not really attached to the thing itself. The thing is just a means to get rid of the desire. Yeah, that's why, even when we get the thing, the desire can morph into something else. Because it's not really the thing, the object of a desire that we're truly interested in. It's one thing to get rid of the desire. Getting rid of it either by satisfying it or squishing it. Here in this set of instructions, it's saying, leave it alone. And it's a very skillful kind. It's a particular kind of leaving it alone. Not leaving it alone and let it wreck, Not leave it alone like, leave alone, an elephant in the china shop, leave alone. Not leave alone in that way. Leave alone here means, first of all, requires what? Presence of mind. Because if you don't have presence of mind, when desire turns up, you are not able to leave it alone because it will drag you around. Then you become the elephant in the china shop. And you'll break a lot of things. Once broken, considered sold. Suffering comes. You get a big bill that you have to settle. To leave it alone here is first requires presence of mind, stability of mind, that you recognize, that's desire. So in a small way, actually in a way that Buddha wasn't so concerned about, for example, desire to scratch. So when you are doing the formal meditation, right? Oh, itchy, itchy, oh, itchy, itchy, itchy. Then the desire is to scratch. To scratch so that it can satisfy that desire. So that hoping that once scratching is over, the desire is gone. Right? So like drinking, So why is it like in formal meditation, they say, don't move so much, don't scratch, don't just pick up to drink things as you wish. Because now, even though scratching, drinking tea to quench thirst, the Buddha has no vendetta against that. But during training in formal meditation, Buddha says, use all situations that arise as a way to train your mind. So itchy. So then you use your awareness of, okay, itch. Then you note how your instinct, or what we call instinct is, you feel an itchiness, you want to immediately scratch to satiate, to satisfy that desire. But now, with awareness, you watch that. I want to scratch. Now with awareness, you're saying, no, I'm going to leave this alone. Leave this desire alone. I'm not going to feed it. When you leave desire alone, when you don't feed it, when you also don't try to crush it, what happens? What can happen? Or maybe you have tried it before. What happens?
It often goes away.
It goes away. Because it runs out of what? Sustaining power. It burns out. Actually, if you look at the first teaching, the first noble truth, if you look at the wording very carefully, Buddha says, with regards to all these afflictive emotions that we have, particularly craving, in every instance of craving, if you don't feed it, if you don't crush it, and he doesn't say the crush it part, but really it's both. If you don't feed it, it will burn itself out. Then it's done. And so here is why mindfulness or alertness of mind, why introspection, why awareness is so important to develop. Because lacking in the ability to be aware of the afflictive emotions turning up, we immediately get dragged around by them. So here in the training in absolute bodhicitta, it's basically training us not to get hooked. So whether in meditation or in post-meditation, basically at this point, I would say, you want to train in absolute bodhicitta, just train in, drop it. Don't get hooked. So even a distraction that turns up, don't get hooked. Don't try to chase it away. Don't try to suppress it. Also, don't feed it. But let the mind not move. It's like, whatever turns up is dancing around, or threateningly, whether threatening you or luring you away, right? You're like, not going with you. Not going to be dragged around. Don't get hooked. That's the first part. Don't get hooked. Then the essence of the path is settling in the alaya state. That one, at this point, I think requires some faith. Faith in what? Faith in, trusting in. We need trust, we need faith because maybe we don't have very strong conviction yet. We don't have very strong experience yet, which is trusting that the mind, if it is truly left alone, will find its own place of rest. I like using this phrase, let your body find its own place. Let your mind find its own place. Get out of the way. I would say essentially, this is how we begin to practice what's known as the alaya state. The alaya is like the ground of the mind. It's saying this, settle into the ground. So, unless you have experienced this ground, this store, sometimes called storehouse or ground, unless you have experienced this ground, in a more direct way, right now it requires some faith, some suspension of disbelief that, if I just leave it alone, that desire will burn itself out and things will quiet down. That annoyance will burn itself out and things will quiet down. That worry, don't feed it. And if you don't feed it, it will exhaust itself and it will. And then not only that, what happens with that is you begin to see how fragile. This is the good news of all things are impermanent, including all the emotions that you habitually has made permanent. We solidify our delusions. We solidify our jailers. We solidify our own fetters, our own chains. And so now, in the training in absolute bodhicitta, we're saying, no, no more. No more. Now I'm learning to see how ephemeral this feeling is. So I don't need to run it out of town, and I don't need to be dragged around by it. I just need to look at it, and I can see it exhaust itself. So in Dzogchen expression, as they say, Rangsha, Rangdro. Rangsha is, it arises by itself. Rangdro, it liberates by itself. Right now, our experience of everything is not Rangsha, Rangdro. Right now, it's all very complicated. But if we begin to train our mind, then we can let all these things relate to them as, it's not me, It's just turning up. Let it turn up. And then, just as it turn up by itself, it will also dissolve by itself. And I can just rest. I can just settle. I can just abide in the alaya state. So this is about absolute bodhicitta. Any questions or comments about this?
It occurs that the various desires that we have, aside from hunger and thirst and so forth, and perhaps even that to some degree, ultimately is the desire to make ourselves happy. And we get deluded into thinking that this or that. We focus on
one step before that, right? To make ourselves happy. One step before that. I think to make ourselves happy, right? There's one step before that.
The realization that we aren't happy.
No, control.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Right. So now this is easily within my control. So no problem, right? This desire with its satisfaction is relatively straightforward.
Yeah.
Because I have control, right? But for everything that I have control, there are many other things that I don't have control. That's the problem. We don't like not having control.
True.
So even this informal meditation, this, right, which is under my control, but in the formal meditation, I resolve. No, I'm not going to act on that control. So even if I feel thirsty, right, during the session, I'm not going to go, Because even though this, right, between desire and satisfaction, there's not much issue or problems, what the problem is, it reinforces the idea. It reinforces my addiction to control. Leaving it alone is training not to crave control. There's a difference between not to crave control and being out of control. Buddha is not advocating being out of control. Like, you know, throw away all control, even if it comes your way. No, Buddha is saying, don't get addicted to control. So then he gave many teachings, you know, such as teachings on how interdependently things arise. That is just to show us, you know, how in the world can we even really control anything? There are so many factors involved in something happening or something not happening. Again, doesn't mean you don't act what is within, you know, reasonable, you think is within your control, and you do it. But even that, you know, you have no way to guarantee. So act where you're able to act. Don't, on the basis of successful action, then over-exaggerate the desirability of control. It's when we get hooked by the desirability of control. That is when dukkha starts. Yeah? So in the formal meditation session, the desire to scratch, the desire to move a little bit so that the tension here is not so strong, all those desires we recruit to help us habituate not being addicted to control. Scratching is not a problem. Quenching thirst is not a problem. Not putting too much stress on your body is not a problem. Buddha has no vendetta against any of those things. But Buddha says you can recruit all of that to train. Not to get addicted to needing to control. This is again related to absolute bodhicitta. The wisdom aspect. So the irony is in the wisdom aspect, right? The ultimate control is the giving up of control. Then everything will be fine. And everything will be fine. Then, yes, then you can be happy. To satisfy that ultimate, right? Which is I've used in the past. Like that is like bodhicitta calling you to answer it, you know, to be happy. That's innate. Everybody, from the smallest single cell creature, it says, to the highest, don't want suffering. Don't want suffering. From saint to sinner, don't want suffering. Nobody taught any of us why. You know? But then, in order to get that, we think control is what we should strive for. That's where the problem is. Craving. The training in relative bodhicitta is the training in love and compassion. Yeah, love and compassion. So here, only 2 lines are given for the formal session, and 3 lines are given for the post, for the off-cushion part. And so here, it's the reverse, which is the formal meditation part is quite straightforward. The other 3 lines, the post-meditation, needs some explanation. The 2 lines for formal meditation, the first is basically training in love and compassion. Compassion is to take, developing the courage, the ability to take on other people's suffering. And loving kindness is developing the ability to give others what we cherish so dearly. With this, they always say, you start with loving kindness. You start with loving kindness. When you start with loving kindness, compassion follows. Of course, you can also start with compassion, but there is a slight danger there, because compassion involves suffering. Now, even if we say, Buddhist compassion is not to suffer with, still it involves suffering. Because it's on the basis of recognizing that someone is suffering, that then we follow up by saying, oh, I don't want you to suffer, right? But because it involves recognizing that someone is suffering, some of us get stuck in the first part. Oh, someone is suffering, and then, then we become dragged down by that suffering. Then forget about taking, Now you cannot even help yourself, right? It's like you see someone drowning, and you're completely paralyzed. Or if you jump in and you don't know how to swim, then both of you are going to drown. So it's safer. That's why actually Buddha taught. First, cultivate metta, loving kindness. When loving kindness is cultivated right, actually the flip side of loving kindness is compassion, So there's a reason why the Buddha started with loving kindness, because the other side of loving kindness is compassion. When we become loving, when we become kind, then that love and care will automatically turn into, I'm willing to inconvenience myself if I'm able to relieve your suffering. So the first line, train in taking and sending alternately. This doesn't involve that meditation of, the more typical Tonglen meditation yet. Yeah. This is just cultivating metta and karuna. In the past, I've recommended to people, I found this one book very helpful, especially for a Western audience. It's called Awakening Through Love. Or With Love. I think through love. Awakening Through Love by John McCransky. That book is very helpful for how to practice loving kindness and all the nuances of loving kindness. Then as you practice loving kindness, compassion comes easily. Then, because the preliminary training, right, if you remember, for this second point is breath, right? Inhale, exhale, to establish mindfulness. It uses breath, right? Then now, since you have been training with breath, then now using your breath. When you inhale, you're inhaling with compassion. When you exhale, you're exhaling with loving kindness, friendliness, warmth. When you inhale, you're inhaling with courage. All the sufferings and the problems of the world, you don't fear, you don't turn away from, you don't run away. You bravely take. And then all the happiness that you have experienced, you freely give and share. Do that. Right? Breathe in, breathe out. There are many, many books, many, many teachers that can teach you in a very systematic way. First with the mother, even in the commentary, it's there in the ancient commentaries. Oh, first you imagine your mother in front of you, and then this, and then that. And I want to kind of, I'll let other people do that work. I want to emphasize more, a much more, I feel, formless and natural way of, when next time you find yourself breathing, which I hope you from time to time find yourselves breathing. Yeah. Next time you find yourself breathing, you just think, yeah, all the problems, all the madness, if you think, is going on in some imaginary place called Washington, D.C. or White House, don't reject that, like, let me breathe that in, since I'm breathing already, let me breathe in with compassion. What kind of suffering, can result in someone becoming so vindictive, apparently, so negative, apparently, so constantly needing everyone to praise them, so volatile, like what kind of psyche, what kind of childhood might have created such an individual? Breathe in all of that, Or if you see all the numbers of all the deaths and the falling apart of economies all around the world, now, you breathe in with compassion. With compassion also means with courage. Why courage? Because you have absolute bodhicitta. Yeah, you cannot do relative bodhicitta without absolute bodhicitta. And what does absolute bodhicitta tell us? Don't be dragged around by your emotions. So you can breathe in with compassion because you say, because I can handle this. Whereas others without the power of Dharma cannot handle. So no problem. I'm not afraid. I will not be pushed down. I will not be diminished. I will not be discouraged. So since I already have to breathe, I will breathe. I will breathe in with compassion. Don't reject suffering. Don't feed suffering. Also, don't reject suffering. Don't glorify suffering. But also don't run with the tails between your legs from suffering. Now breathe with compassion, with courage, with confidence. That this, too, is like a dream. And then breathe out with warmth and loving kindness. Warmth. May you be well and happy. May you be protected. May everyone be protected from suffering. So this is to mount these two on your breath, the second line. Three objects, three poisons, three roots of virtue, in all activities trained by means of the words. As for the progressive order of taking, start with oneself. These are the 3 lines given for off cushion. So for off cushion, 3 objects refer to 3 types of situations, 3 types of things, 3 types of people. Wheel of Fortune, right? The categories like what? People, places, and things, or something like that. Yeah, basically that, you know. But they are categorized into 3. What are the 3? Like, don't care. So experiences, we either habitually label as like, don't like, or don't care. People who turn up in our lives habitually will label like, don't like, or don't care. Situations that you walk yourself into, whether in the workplace or in the marketplace or in the Dharma center, like, don't care. With regards to these 3 objects, so to say, or these 3 types of situations, 3 types of people, 3 types of places. Watch out for the 3 poisons: anger, attachment, or confusion. Antidote to these 3 are the 3 roots of virtue, which is the opposite of confusion is clarity. The opposite of anger is the wisdom that comes from that clarity, which sometimes is called patience. But it's not like patience, but an ability to accept things that you don't like, a kind of, yeah, a vastness of mind. I mean, anger is basically the result of not being able to accept what is, what has turned up. So you want to squish it, right? But now here you have a vastness of mind and heart. It's not saying, you know, like injustice, the anger against injustice, that's something else, you know. So this is, again, not an excuse for injustice to continue. But the emotional reaction to injustice that causes suffering, that, you know, not necessary. When we think it is necessary, that's when we give in, and then that's when anger happens. And then attachment, again, attachment is possessiveness, that you want to possess, you want to control, and then you relinquish control. So the 3 roots of virtue. So off cushion, how do we practice love and compassion? By recognizing what are the 3 objects, what are the 3 poisons, and what are the 3 roots of virtue. With regards to the 3 objects, abandon the 3 poisons and always engage in the 3 roots of virtue. In all activities, train by means of the words. Here it's an advice that says, it's good to remember these words, these slogans, what has been called as slogans. It's good to remember the commitments of Lojong, which we have finished that section, point 6. It's good to remember the precepts of Lojong, point 7. It's good to remember these words: 3 objects, 3 poisons, 3 roots of virtue. So this is like Lojong mantras. Yeah. In fact, I think my teacher himself, he says, you know, these mantras sometimes may be more useful than Om Mani Padme Hum, Om Mani Padme Hum. What he means is, he says, these mantras are more universal. He says, Om Mani Padme Hum, of course, I believe to be very powerful. But he says, forget about non-Buddhists, you know. Theravada Buddhists, just, they are even Buddhists, but they don't accept Om Mani Padme Hum. So it says, you know, whereas these words in Lojong, yeah, with religion, without religion, Buddhist, non-Buddhist. It can all work really well. It can all work really well. So these words, they're good. So train by means of this. The last advice for the off cushion, this is also a very special advice. It says, as for the progressive order of taking. So we know, right? The word taking is referring to what? Another word? Training in what? Training in what?
Karuna.
Karuna. Good. So what we call compassion, right? As for how to train in Karuna, it says start with oneself. That means with regards to your own suffering, with regards to the things that you cannot accept about yourself, with regards to the reasons why you're not comfortable in your own skin, learn to accept that first. When you know how to accept that, then other people's shortcomings, other people's suffering, other people's confusion will not be so hard to accept and then to take. On the technique level of this, they say in the commentaries that go way back to even the early times, it says it is to train by thinking, whatever suffering that I might experience tomorrow or next week or next year or 10 years later, may it all come right now. Think like that. Because right now I'm of sound mind, so to say. So let it happen now so that I can clear out all this stuff. Think of it that way. That is like a more technique oriented. But the way that I want to suggest to you is to think in terms of, as for taking, before you try to take other people's suffering, how about developing the courage, developing the ability to handle your own suffering? This is what it's saying. Very crucial instruction. Very crucial. We only have to pay attention to this line. Because it can be so inspiring to take other people's suffering. Especially this cultural context, where the suffering Christ, where there's this imagery of a God that gave himself for the sake of the world. This ultimate sacrifice. Then, even when we don't follow that tradition anymore, it's still lurking somewhere in the background. But from the Dharma perspective, if you don't know what to do with your own suffering yet, taking other people's suffering, it's like a drowning person, you don't know how to swim, but you are so, kind of moved by that person's drowning suffering, you jump in. It's not going to work. Especially if there is someone who knows how to swim, is already down there trying to save that person. You jump in, Now that person has to figure out how to save two people. Don't do that. When I say don't do that, what I mean is not giving up, bodhicitta. No. It's giving up premature wanting to do something. You don't give up thinking and developing, how can I be less self-centered? But the quest of becoming less self-centered cannot be at the price of, what will work? It cannot be. You cannot undermine the bigger goal by your over-eagerness to want to make a difference now. So this is the section on the main practice of Lojong, the training in the two bodhicittas. Questions, comments? Praise, blame. Come on.
Can I ask a question?
Yes.
On the first part, the training and the ultimate?
Yes.
And I'm not sure if I either need clarification because I didn't understand what you were teaching correctly, or I need more explanation because I didn't understand.
It's okay.
Okay, so when you were talking, you were making the point about craving and control, and what I thought I understood you to say was that or did I, that's my question. Did I understand you to say that the craving and control, well, the ultimate, let me go back. The ultimate bodhicitta is the training in emptiness, correct? That's what we're talking about when we're talking about ultimate and training the mind in emptiness. And then, so then the training, the craving and the control, I'm not sure then how getting over that, not getting dragged around by that, with like the bull with the ring in the nose, how that is helping with the training and the emptiness. I guess I'm seeing.
No, it's the other way around.
Okay, the other way around.
Training in emptiness allows you not to be dragged around by your emotions.
Okay. Okay, that makes more sense.
Training in emptiness means seeing the interdependent nature of everything that turns up, including craving to control, including wanting to get rid of desire. All of those are interdependently arising. If they're interdependently arising, that means they're very fragile. If they're very fragile, for the most part, you don't need to do anything about it. It comes with an expiration date. Just don't keep renewing it. When we feed it, we're renewing it. So, the more we understand emptiness, the other side of this coin is interdependently arising. Right? Interdependently arising, another way to express it, the contingency nature of all experiences. Contingency. This is contingent upon this, which 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 is contingent upon this. You're like, oh my God, so many contingencies. Is it even going to happen or not? For the most part, it never happens. Except for here and here, we make it all happen. Then here and here, there, for the most part, it is not happening. I think there's a quote attributed to Mark Twain. I'm an old man, and I've lived a long time and seen a lot of troubles, most of which never happened, except for. Well, everything is so contingent upon everything, you know. That the fact that, you know, something actually happens, whether good or bad, you know, before you even get caught up in good or bad, the fact that even actually something happening that you can verify, oh, it is happening, before you get into good or bad, you should be like, wow, it actually is happening. When you can see, you know, how many contingencies are involved in something happening before you even start complaining. If it is something that you're going to label undesirable, or before you even get excited about, you know, how good this is going to be because you labeled it as good. Prior to all of that, first you need to go, amazing. But we have lost this recognition. So then we get dragged around by hope and fear. We don't see things as Buddha sees it. If we see everything as Buddhas see it, then you could sort of say, you know, every moment is a moment of wonder. Wow. 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 No time for hope and fear. And also, you don't, you know, hope and fear are both hooks. I'm not biting. Yeah. Third point, which we have already covered, but just to go over, that point is about, now, Lojong, when things get really bad, how do we put Lojong to good use? When the rubber hits the road, right? That's where it matters the most. So it says here, when the world and its inhabitants are filled with harmful actions, transform adversities into the path of awakening. No better time than now, right now, collectively. This is when the world and his inhabitants are filled with harmful actions that we can see other people doing, harmful actions that we can see it happening right now. This is the time, it says, you know, where we transform adversities. So then, right, to not fear adversities, it goes back to that training, right? With karuna, you breathe in. You got to breathe anyways, right? So then, why not breathe in with the courage and the fearlessness that comes from karuna? Breathe it in with courage. Normally, when the world and its inhabitants are filled with harmful actions, so the world, what is the harmful actions of the world? This is the so-called natural disasters. What are the harmful actions of the inhabitants? These are harmful actions, people behaving in ways that are productive of suffering. So whether it is animate or inanimate forms of suffering, when it occurs, this is the time to transform the adversities onto the path of awakening. Let this fuel our commitment to achieve freedom. I shared on Facebook, a beautiful translation of the songs of the early sisters, elders. Teri is elder. So there's a collection from early Buddhism called Theragata and Terigata. So verses of the elders, male and female. And there's one by this elder, Tisa, which is beautiful, beautifully rendered. Let me see. Let me pull it up. Where did it go? It says, she says, why stay here in your little dungeon? If you really want to be free, make every thought a thought of freedom. A thought of freedom doesn't mean you're thinking, oh, I want to be free, I want to be free, but make every thought liberated. That means not dragged around. If you really want to be free, what is the real dungeon? The real dungeon is being trapped and dragged around by our emotions. So she says, if you really want to be free, make every thought a thought of freedom. Break your chains, tear down the walls, then walk the world a free woman. Walk the world a free woman. A beautiful book I would recommend. It's called First Free Women, Poems of the Early Buddhist Nuns. A point of pride, this new translation done by a man. I was surprised. I don't know, my own confusion, I just kind of instinctively thought, oh, must be a woman that translated this. No, a man translated. I was like, oh. Sweet to see that, It's beautifully done, this translation. So that is how we become free, And that is also where we become trapped. We are trapped by our little dungeons, by our own walls, by our own thoughts, by our own emotions. So when adversities arise, make the resolve, like now, even more opportunities to break down this self-imposed, self-built dungeon. Drive all blames into one, and that one is self-grasping. Now, even though, right, it says in this tradition of bodhicitta training, you accept self-grasping. You start with there. You start there. Right? I told how Atisha said, of his 3 masters that taught him bodhicitta, is the Indonesian master who says, it's okay if you are self-grasping. Let's start with there. So let's think about, how do you become happy? How can you fulfill your deepest desires? Now let's look at, what are your deepest desires? Then let's work with that. Then slowly, slowly we will see. In fact, it's precisely our limited, our very claustrophobic, very dungeony definitions of I, me, and mine. That is at the root of the dissatisfaction that we are experiencing. And meditate on the great kindness of everyone. Very hard, because social media is created to do the opposite. Tell you why everything is wrong and why everybody is wrong. Whatever good news of someone doing something, right? Someone has to write about how, you know what? It's not as good as you think. Really? Even before we have time to appreciate whatever good, someone already will write the next article. You know what? It's not as good as you think. Oh, such a nihilistic culture that we have. Painful, The Lojong tradition says, no, meditate on the great kindness of everyone. Jesus said, you can see the splinter in the other person's eye. You cannot see the log that is in yours, But now we are taught to see logs everywhere. You know, it's such a nihilistic culture that we're in. I don't care, you know. I know maybe I will offend some of you. I don't care whether you're on the left or you're on the right. Both are addicted to this nihilistic. Instead of encouraging us to see kindness, recognize kindness, celebrate kindness, everything, you know, in news, in social media, is constantly about what is wrong, what is wrong, what is not enough, what is not enough. This is like the definition of hungry ghost realm and hell realm, both joined together. Meditating on the confused appearances of the four kayas, confused appearances as the four kayas. And then the best methods is the four practices. And those are rather technical. We have talked about it. I'm not going to repeat here because it'll take up the rest of our time. But the last line, you know, whatever unexpected turns up related to your training. Literally, the word is meditation, but really it's talking about training. Because meditation is also not, you know, this. It's cultivation. So related to your cultivation, related to your training. For us, you know, whatever unexpected turns up, you know, complain. Whatever unexpected turns up, you know, get depressed. Whatever unexpected turn up, you know, I'm going back to sleep. I'm calling Tuesday off. See you. Here it says, you know, whatever unexpected turns up related to your training. It's possible, you know. I mean, I still get annoyed, you know, when something unexpected turns up, you know. But now the annoyance, you know, compared to before, now it's shorter. I let it expire. I don't keep renewing it. I can tell you that. Not boasting, but just to say it works, you know. It can work. Just don't keep renewing it. Let it expire, the annoyance that turns up. And then when the annoyance turns up, you know, don't beat yourself over it and say, oh, bad person, bad Dharma practitioner. No, then you are still feeding it, yeah? Just leave it alone. Recognize the annoyance, you know. Then don't feed it. And it will expire. It will go away. Fourth is a lifetime's practice in summary. 5 is the measure of having trained the mind. 6 is the commitments. So in 6, all the advice given there is stated in the negative, basically. Don't do this. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Yeah, mainly. Then, even if the wording in 1 or 2 is just like do this, when you look at the commentary, when you look at the explanation, it's basically saying, don't damage your commitment to training in bodhicitta by doing the following things. So give up these things. The precepts is about the things that we should do. We've already gone beyond 9, so let me just take the first 2. So the guidelines or the precepts for Lojong, 1 and 2 is, do all practices in a singular way, counter all errors and oppressions in a singular way. So here in the commentary, it says, you know, with regards to many other practices, and at this point in Tibetan Buddhism, in the 11th century, 12th century, already there are many, many, many different methods, and many, many different deities, and many, many different rituals, and many, many different retreats. And often with all these practices, there's many, many different things. You have to do this way, you have to do this way, and then this has to be done this way, and this has to be done this way. So here it says, Doesn't matter what practice you do. Do it as long as you have one ingredient that is present, then it will be fine. And the singular way is do it for the purposes of bodhicitta. Then whether you chant mantra, you do prostrations, you plant trees, you protest injustice, all of that becomes Lojong. Putting on clothes, cooking for your family, doing groceries becomes Lojong. Explicitly spiritual practices and day-to-day activities all transform into Lojong. Counter all errors and oppressions, all the difficulties that arise, respond to them in one way. In other words, frame all your experiences around this commitment to actualizing absolute and relative bodhicitta. Then no need to pick and choose. Good things that happen become Lojong training. Bad things that happen, it becomes Lojong training. Neutral things that happen becomes Lojong training. When people disappoint us, when people hurt us, it becomes Lojong. When people praise us, when people recommend us, also need to become Lojong. So the first two lines, the word one is there. The next three lines, two. And then after that, let's see, after that, 1, 2, 3, 4 has to do with three. Then no more, no 4 and 5. But the first two lines has to do with one. Second three lines, two. Then as for three, it's the next 4 lines, 4 precepts, 4 guidelines. Then after that, it's like, in all areas. Good. Questions, comments, clarification? A few more minutes.
I have a question.
Sure.
So when you said it, when you were talking about desire and control, right?
Mm-hmm.
It just kind of like, I'm still processing that, but I can see that. Where even in the example that you gave of the bottle of water, it's like, I'm thirsty, but I'm choosing not to drink, but it's because it's there, it's available, right?
Yes.
But if there is no water, there's that craving, like, and if the supermarket is closed and the water is frozen, then it becomes like really unnerving. And
oh yeah.
I can see we're beyond that. I mean, there's, the wish to be happy, but it's the wish to control.
Yes.
So I don't know this. If you could just say something else, I'm still like kind of.
Oh, no need to say something else,
Okay.
Because this is to be experienced. Yeah, these are all just pointers, I mean, I'm a little lazy right now, but in defense of the laziness, I will say, I admit, I'm quite aware I can be really clever with my words. So if I think a little bit more, I can, say a lot of words that, that you listen and you go, wow, not very helpful. I'm trying not to do that so much anymore. I want us to work on really experiencing from the heart, then it will really stick with you. It's a real lotus. I want to share with you, speaking of beauty, sharing happiness. Bill Laity, who owns a landscaping business, one of his clients, a Chinese medicine doctor, has a pond full of lotuses that are blooming right now. So, of course, lotuses are flowers, impermanent too. But, the smell is subtle, but so pleasant. He even brought muddy water. Fresh water will actually kill it. That's why lotus is a symbol of the deities sit on lotus, because they need muddy water, but they bloom above the mud, giving beauty and fragrance. So that's why all deities are seated on lotuses, not because lotuses are that comfortable to sit on, even if they become big enough, but it's a symbol of how, like Lojong, because there is mud, therefore the flowers can bloom. Therefore the lotus can bloom. So we close with Bodhicitta dedication, which says, excellent and precious Bodhicitta, where it has not arisen, may it arise. Where it has arisen, may it not decline, but continue to increase higher and higher, magnify greater and greater. Changchu Semcho Rinpoche Ma Kye Parnam Kye Gyurche Kye Pa Nyam Pa Me Pa Yang Gong Ne Gong Du Bel War Sho. So I think this particular series, for sure, next Thursday, we will continue. And then maybe one more Thursday. And then this Lojong series, we're going to stop. And then take a break maybe, for 1 or 2 weeks. Right? I mean, when we started, the thought is like we will finish this, in person, for those of you who are in Nashville, and live cast from there. But when the unexpected turns up, take it onto the path. So we chug along virtually. Then I said to another group, maybe not this group, but I see that there are some of you from around here. We are trying to find a location. I think we've found the location. Now it's just timing to have an outdoor retreat where you come in the morning and then you leave at the end of the day in Asheville. So one of our members' backyard is huge. So he says even with 6 feet distance, maybe up to 40 people. I mean, that's how big it is. I said, no, we're not going to have 40 people, at most maybe we have 20. And he was like, oh yeah, then no problem. So we're going to set up like, a tent, but we're going to look for like when it's not so hot, right now it's a little muggy. So probably end of summer, early fall, to do a weekend outdoor gathering retreat where all the social distancing will be observed. We're going to come up with very clearly, like if you need to use the bathroom in the house, when you go in and wipe things down and this and that, and after you use it, then everybody bring your own lunch, you know, and all of that. So if you live close enough, you know, and or you live here, and if you are, you know, feeling like you want to join us, you know, stay tuned. And then if you live around here, and you know, we all have our different reasons why we should or should not come. There's no pressure at all, because you have to take care of yourself, you know, and only you can do that for yourself. Yeah. So have a good night, and see you whenever.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Lai.